One of the things Deirdre Walsh and I have in common is that we both spent years covering Congress while raising kids. That's a strange intersection of worlds. One minute you're chasing lawmakers through the Capitol. The next you're helping with homework or getting someone off to practice. Today we're talking about what decades covering Washington teaches you. Not just about politics, but about people, priorities, and how your perspective changes over time. Deirdre, you and I became friends well, before we had kids, but you and I have grown up covering Capitol Hill, working on Capitol Hill as parents. I'm curious about how it is being a parent changed the way you cover Congress, if it did at all.
I think it changed the issues that or stories I would pitch as I got older and my kid got older. One good example is when I was working at NPR, there were a group of 4 senators that were working on a bill about social media protection and requiring different rules. And I was in the throes of battling my teenager about these issues and wanting to look and see what sites she was looking at and who was reaching out to her on these sites. And I learned a lot about Discord, which I didn't know anything about before I had a teenager. And I think it definitely changed like what kind of policy issues like I personally was dealing with just as a parent, and I thought could be a good story that people would relate to.
That makes total sense. And I feel like it's informed my way of communicating too, because we look at it through different lenses. And I think that's true of life. You know, so much of the way we do our work is influenced by what's affecting us over time. When you first started covering Capitol Hill, what did you think the job was about?
Well, my first job on Capitol Hill was I was a producer for CNN at the time, and we had a pretty small team. It was a House producer, a Senate producer, and I think we had 2 on-air reporters at the time. So I was a little confused as if I was my own one-man band news coverer or if I was supposed to be producing and focusing on the stories that the on-air reporters were doing. And then it just became clear I had to do it all. And it was like, if I found out something, they would run to a camera and they would report it. So it was a true partnership. And I learned that playing as a team was the way to succeed and break news, because I think our sources got to know us both as producers, but off-air reporters. So we had great opportunities to break news because we were working with different people and we would hear different things, and it'd be like, I got one source on this. Can you get a second source on this? And the on-air reporters I was working with throughout my time at CNN on the Hill were amazing colleagues and also great to give you a shout out if it was your scoop. Not all on-air Capitol Hill reporters are like that. I felt lucky that I was working with a team that was like that. But the job really, really changed over the time I was there. There were far fewer reporters on the Hill when I started, which is right around 2006. And now, I mean, there are different outlets. There are a mix of people that do off-air digital reporting, on-air reporting for broadcasts, whether it be television or radio. There's newsletter reporters, there's reporters for websites, there's, platforms that have both, like where I work now. News of the United States has an active website. We have a newsletter, we have a podcast. So I think it's evolved into, if you're reporting on Capitol Hill, the best way to success is to really think of yourself as a multi-platform reporter, because the audience is different on different platforms and you want your stories to get to all of those audiences.
What's also surprising to me, too, you mentioned the camaraderie, some good, some challenging. Overall, though, the one thing that stands out to me is the way that the Capitol Hill Press Corps moves together. And while there is definitely an exclusive and a who's got it first moment, there's also a ton of collaboration. I feel like the story that came out of COVID even was that there was this tremendous collegial opportunity that really happens up there. Will you talk a little bit about that?
Definitely. I tell anyone who wants to come cover politics in Washington, Capitol Hill is the best beat by far. You have amazing access to newsmakers, and you can walk downstairs from the 3rd floor press galleries to walk in into the speaker's hallway to his office, and you can ask him a question directly. And it's very, most people across the press corps have the same access as everyone else. You work hard and you hustle, you can find those lawmakers in the hallways. But yes, are definitely times where there's a really long stakeouts, really late nights. You happen to go get a coffee when someone comes out, and another reporter will share their file. Just, I got you, you got me. During COVID, as you mentioned, unlike the White House, which has somebody covering the president, essentially around the clock, and a dedicated pool that travels with the president, the Hill is not like that. But so during COVID, there was an informal pool that was created for reporters that felt comfortable coming to the Hill, and then others who didn't would do other things, like they would transcribe files or press conferences remotely. They would help circulate things, and it was just life-saving. I worked at NPR at the time, and it was hard because a lot of people were new moms, and they didn't feel safe coming to the Hill. And then there were other people who, I had an older kid who was vaccinated earlier than others, so I was up there a little bit more than other colleagues. But you just sort of if you were there, you helped contribute to the reporting. If you weren't, you helped support those who were up there who did. And I think it's just a testament to that kind of collegiality that's pretty much always been there on the Hill.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, and you described it perfectly. When I was in the speaker's office, reporters would come on up into the communications office and check in to see what we knew about what it was that was unfolding. Let me flip a little bit, though, to the members of Congress. And you've covered it for some time, 2026, 20 years, a lot of experience, tons of change, Deirdre, since you started. But what would you say is the quality in members that you cover that continues to be consistent as it relates to good communications or good stewardship, or people that are easier to work with as it relates to who to cover?
Well, you sort of learn the people that are willing to talk and trust you. You have to build relationships, and it's always sad when one of your best sources retires, runs for Senate, and then goes over to the Senate side. I started out as a House reporter, and then when I worked at NPR, I was basically covering the whole building, and now I have a big team here at Notice that's covering the whole building. So, but it's always sad when, a great source retires or loses, and you're you don't pick a side, but you're like, who am I going to ask about defense issues? Because this was my key source on defense issues. Or who am I going to talk about appropriations with? Because this person knew the ins and outs and could explain it to me. In terms of the members, the qualities, I'm going to say, I think pretty consistently, there's always been a group of members, no matter what phase of my career, that you learned were the sort of the trusted voices that would not spin you. And I think it's harder and harder to find a big group of those, because I feel like it's a pretty polarized place, and with the margin so thin, especially in the House these days, those members are there aren't as many of them. But I think it's in the institution's interest and a lot of these members' interests to give you the scoop unvarnished, right? Because it's going to impact whether or not they're going to be able to pass something, or whether or not their preferred policy is going to win out at the end of the day. So I think it's trying to find those people, and I think they exist. I think a lot of people outside of Washington are like, oh, Congress, they're a bunch of do nothings. They don't do anything. They're so dysfunctional. They fight all the time. They do fight a lot. That's been consistent. And the fighting has gone way more public with social media. That was not nearly a factor when I started. Now the fights can be really personal over social media, which I think is an odd way to handle it as a lawmaker, just to go on social media and attack so-and-so member, either from the opposition or your own party. I mean, it's devolved into that. But I try to stay away from those kinds of fights and try to go and talk to people more one-on-one.
Yeah, I mean, there's a real humanity behind the headlines. Like you mentioned, that there's so much of that doesn't get reported. And that's probably okay. But what would you say if you were to tell someone outside of Washington, D.C. about politicians in Washington that would surprise them, do you think? Like, what
Um,
stands out?
some of them are friends with people that you wouldn't suspect.
Mhm.
Some of them work on things that you don't get a lot of coverage. I did a story. I just happened to meet some spouses at like a off the record event, and one of the spouses said, "Oh, I'm like chair of the Congressional Spouses Club," and I was like, "Wow, can I do a story on that? Like, what are you guys working on?" And she was working on a cancer prevention initiative with a bunch of spouses, including this is Lisa McGovern, Jim McGovern's wife, and she was working with Shelley Moore Capito's husband. And I think he was the first male president of the Spouses Association. Like he had done it like before her or whatever, but somehow they ended up having some shared unfortunate family connections to people losing people to cancer, or people struggling with cancer. And I did this whole story about these research projects and how she traveled to West Virginia and he traveled to do events with her. And it was like, not only do they get along, but like their spouses know each other because of their member spouses know each other because of them. Like they met and then they're like, oh, you probably would never work with Jim McGovern or you probably would never talk to this person. But they built relationships outside of Congress. So that, and I mean, I did a story in the pickleball caucus, which was fun. Like there's a pickleball court on the fifth floor of the Dirksen building. Did you know that, Lisa?
No, I did not know that.
So it's a basketball tennis court, which evidently there's fights over like who gets to reserve the court. Like Ted Cruz likes to play basketball there a lot. Kirsten Gillibrand likes to play tennis there a lot, but then they convert it to this pickleball court.
That's awesome.
It's like 2 mornings a week. So I did a story on that. It was really fun.
What would you say? So, the thing I love so much about Notice and the work that you're doing now is that you have this tremendous fellows program.
Exactly. Yeah.
How would you say being involved with that has informed or maybe changed you and your perception about reporting in general as you look forward to the future? Like, I would imagine that that's probably changed and shaded some of your work today.
For sure. I mean, I came to Notice, I think, in large part because I had heard about the fellowship program. I had read a lot of the stories that both fellows and staff reporters had done. I was always interested in like maybe teaching as like a next phase of my career at some point, but I felt like I had done like a lot of informal training when I worked with younger colleagues at NPR or CNN that would come to the Hill and I would sort of like walk them through the paces, like here's where you stand, here's where you go, here's who to talk to. The fellowship program is just amazing. So first of all, these early career journalists have already had some experience in journalism, and then they go through a really competitive application process to get picked as fellows, and then they get jobs for 2 years with benefits, and they attend classes, but they also get sprinkled around the newsroom. And so we had 2 on my team. One just got a job, and I think tomorrow is her first day at a new job. But so it's sad because you like work with them and you're so excited about their success, but then they leave. But we have another class of fellows that is being announced this week and will start in September. So I'm looking forward to that. But it really reminds you to take a step back and remember, like, these people don't know where the speaker's lobby is. They don't know where people hang out when they're not on the floor. Like, they don't know things that like that come naturally to people who've been running around the building for a while. So it's fun to be up on the Hill with them. I spend a lot of time up there, probably more time on the Hill than in the office. Sort of like giving them advice about, oh, you're doing a story on education. Like, here's a couple people that would be good to talk to and are good talkers. That's the other thing is that there's, 435 members of the House, 100 senators. Like, some like to talk, some blow you off, and then some you just don't want to talk to because like they never tell you anything, So you have to learn how to navigate that, and it's fun to be able to teach that to some younger early. And I want them to be Hill nerds. Like, I want them to love it as much as I do.
Yeah. Well, I think too, the one thing that stands out to me is that at a time you and I have been doing this for about the same period of time. The story has always been about a lot of downside to the business of journalism. And I think what I have said, and I say it not just because you're a guest today and you're my friend, but because I feel like the one hopeful story right now in the world of journalism is the reinvestment that Notice is making, not only in really supporting those really early career journalists, but also investing in a newsroom to bring in folks from all different sides of Capitol Hill and Washington, D.C., and really reinvesting. And it's really exciting for a lot of us. Will you talk to us about, can you give us a little preview of maybe some other things to look for from Notice in the coming weeks?
Yeah. So beyond the amazing political coverage of both Capitol Hill and the White House and the campaigns, which it's really starting to heat up in terms of the midterm season, we brought on local reporters. So they're reporting on the mayor's race in D.C., which there hasn't been a contested mayor's race in D.C. in a while. So that's been fun. I worked with one of them when I worked in public radio, and I'm so excited that he's here. Martin Ostermules joined our newsroom. We have hired sports reporters to cover the Nats, to cover sort of the intersection of power and sports and politics and how, the business of sports intersects with, government in Washington. There's been so many stories in the last year about, teams coming back to the city, teams maybe trying to be stolen away from the city to Virginia that are now reinvesting in DC. So there'll be a lot of sports and local news coverage. And as someone who's lived here for, ever since I moved here to cover Congress, I'm now a resident. I mean, this is where I live now. So I think we're going to have something that's a little different than a lot of other Washington publications that cover the government. We are also going to cover sort of the city, the business, of power and how it intersects with both the politicians, but also those who are running the city, whether it be government or big institutions around the city.
When you reflect on your own experience, is there a story like from your career that stands out as one that was really transformational or one that you're like most proud of?
I've had so many fun stories. I did a lot of breaking news that I remember, but I think one that was a little different was a story that I worked on. I think it was in 2012. You never know when you're talking to somebody if like a conversation is going to lead to like a tip or something that becomes a story. And Congress at the time was debating this bill called the Stock Act, the Stop Trading on Insider Knowledge, congressional knowledge. So it was basically came out after a bad series of stories came out insinuating that members of Congress were making money on information they were gathering on their jobs. And obviously insider trading's against the law. There are laws that police that, but Congress felt the need because it was a bad perception to pass this bill. So they did. And then I was talking to somebody about it because I'd covered it for several months. And they were like, the rules are different for the House and Senate. And I was like, how can that be? They passed the same bill. It's like, the whole Schoolhouse Rocks thing. It has to be the same bill that goes to the president. I'm like, how can they be different rules for the House and the Senate? And like, well, the committees are interpreting them differently. And I was like, wait. And then I'm like, that sounds like a loophole. And essentially one chamber, the House, was not covering spouses or dependent children. So you could learn something, talk to your spouse about it, and they could trade, but they would never have to disclose any of their trades because they were essentially in this loophole. So we started asking around about it. And I worked with my colleague, Dana Bash, who I worked with for years and was an amazing reporting partner. And we found out that, in fact, it was a loophole and the senators were really mad at the House members. And we did the story. And then a couple days later, I got this phone call and I was like, okay, Deirdre, you should watch the House floor because you see a change to that law. So they basically closed the loophole and changed the law because of our story. So that was kind of fun. You always dream of like making Congress do something to react to your reporting. But I think that was one story where it was like a team story. So Dan and I worked on the story together, which helped get it done quickly. And we brainstormed about who the right people were to talk to explain it to an audience, because it's a little complicated story. But that issue is still going on today. I mean, they're still debating whether or not members of Congress should really be trading stocks. So it's an issue that's like survived time. But at the very beginning, we were looking at it.
That's awesome. And it's the kind of you're absolutely right. It's the kind of thing that you hope that you will do when you start this in this journey as a journalist. And when you see it happen, it probably takes a minute for you to realize it's after you've had it done that you're like, okay, that was what we came here to do. It's so cool.
Yeah.
Deirdre, my last question has to be, how do you balance it all? You've got everything. You've got this great career. You've got this great family. You've got all of these things happening. It's totally messy. I know, because I'm on the other side of it trying. There is no really good advice, but you're in a world where you're giving good advice to people that are coming up in their career, how to balance these things. Is there a piece of advice maybe that someone gave you or something that you offer to folks today that you think is of use?
I mean, I think the first job I had in journalism taught me a lot. I was a researcher for Judy Woodruff. That was my first job in journalism. She was an anchor at CNN at the time, and I really came in really cold. I didn't know a lot about television news. I, studied journalism and was interested in writing and was more of a writer than a TV person, but I just watched how much she prepared for things. And I think the thing I talk to reporters about is read up and be ready to know what questions you want to ask. Be prepared when you go in and start reporting on a story, because you might learn, they may answer your question and maybe your story doesn't turn out to be a story after all. But then you know enough about it that you can sort of go the next mile. And I think being prepared is really the way that I I know I've done all the work I can do. I can't control what happens next because this is a crazy news cycle every day, but at least I can know that I've done what I can to get ready for the day. And then you just have to go and adjust along the way.
I think that's good advice for all careers, right? Just do the best you can to be prepared and let the rest kind of fall as it will.
Yeah.
Deirdre, this was so incredibly fun. I cannot wait to follow all of the great things that are happening, not only with your reporting, but with the work that you're doing at Notice. Thank you so much for being a guest today.
Yeah, it's great. It's always great to talk to you, Lisa.
One of the things I enjoyed about this conversation is that it wasn't just about Congress or politics. It's about perspective, how covering the same institution over decades while building a family and a great career changes the way you see the world. My thanks to Deirdre Walsh of NOTUS for joining us this week. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe, share the episode with a friend, or join us next Friday for another episode in a conversation with people about journalism, communications, and public affairs. I'm Lisa Camooso Miller, and this is the Friday Reporter.